Again, ladies and gentlemen, I welcome you as we explore this important topic in this webinar. With those few remarks, may I now invite the Principal, College of Agriculture and Veterinary Sciences, Professor Dos Nyikal, to make a few remarks and then invite the Vice Chancellor to open this webinar. Dos Nyikal.
Thank you very much, Professor Nyangito. Our Vice Chancellor, Professor Kiama, our invited keynote speaker, Professor Opara, Principal Secretary, Agricultural Research, Professor Boga, our invited guests, Dr. Oza and Professor Okafor. Ladies and gentlemen, may I take this opportunity to welcome you to our webinar, the second in the series for the college. We already had one last week. Now this is our second in this series as we celebrate the University of Nairobi at 50. It is my pleasure to welcome you that we share what we have experienced and the opportunities for us, because as University of Nairobi gets to 50, that is when we have also experienced an unusual state, the COVID-19, which has changed many things, even the way we learn, the way we teach, the way we produce things, the way we approach the market. So indeed, the webinar could not come at a more opportune time. Feel welcome and let us share everything that we have. May I take now this opportunity to welcome the Vice Chancellor to give us his address and open the webinar. Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome,
thank you,
Professor Kiama.
Thank you, Professor Nyikal, the Principal of the College of Agriculture and Veterinary Sciences, as well as the Dean of the Faculty, Professor Nyagito. I see that Professor Mwangombe, the former principal, is also in the house. The other deans and director, I see David Mungai is also there. And obviously our main speaker, Professor Rainas Opara from Stellenbosch University. And I had him mention, the dean also mentioned that the PS, Crop Development and Agricultural Research, Professor Hamadi Boga, is here or he will be joining? Is he here already, Professor?
No, I think he hasn't joined.
Okay,
he hasn't joined yet. Yeah.
Yes, because it's good, you know, the screen, you don't see everyone. It's always very important to acknowledge. And now I want also to acknowledge all the panelists and participants who have come for this meeting. This is a very, very important meeting. I'm delighted to welcome all of you for this webinar, which is organized by the Faculty of Agriculture, College of Agriculture and Veterinary Sciences, University of Nairobi. For all of you who have come to participate in this is obviously a very clear indication of your commitment to supporting food and nutrition security initiatives in the country, in the region, as well as in the globe. As you are aware, the government set their priorities, what they call the Agenda 4. And one of those agendas was food and nutrition security. And this webinar is aligned to that Agenda 4. And it is very important that we are discussing it also in the context of the COVID COVID-19 pandemic. The College of Agriculture and Veterinary Sciences and the all universities doing agriculture have a role, a very important role, for realizing this agenda priority of the government. The college, because I'm from there, I'm aware that they continue to contribute in a big way to food and nutrition security in the country. As in ways of outreach to farmers, where many farmers have been trained on various food technologies, because I've been sometimes had occasions to visit the various parts of the country where the college had links and they had work that was ongoing with the communities. We are aware that the college also had even in the dryland research session in Kibwesi to teach issues of drylands, and we have done quite a bit there. We know we have very powerful team. We have a very powerful team in the college on the seed production, and they produce various seed varieties, particularly for beans. And we have also built huge capacity of the graduates that the college has produced over time to go and serve in various sectors. And some of them have gone and taken even leadership positions in the private sector, in the public sector, as well as even in the universities, in higher education, coming from the college. So this is commendable. And when you are celebrating these 50 years, it's a time to reflect on what you have achieved, the college has achieved, and what it intends to do in the next 50 years. You have worked with the distinction to bring, the college has worked with the distinction to bring technological interventions in food and in nutrition security. As I mentioned, in production of various crop varieties. It is also commendable to note that our scientists from this university and the college specifically have continued to work in addressing food waste and losses. And I know the Department of Crop Science and the Plant Protection, working with food science, have been really on this. And there are also some members from agriculture economics and food safety issues that have been a challenge to our production systems. The technologies developed in food and feed processing and preservation by our researchers have become hardy in adopting our farmers and the pastoralists to climate change, and they obviously ameliorating the impacts of COVID-19. And you know, COVID-19 came with various disruptions, the COVID-19 pandemic. It resulted into the decline of economic activity, which affected food production, disrupted the critical food value chains, also resulting in increase in food prices, and therefore reduced household disposable income on food. We know initially there was quite a high regulation of the transport and the movement, but even particularly the closing of restaurants, or the eateries, where you could not eat outside, you eat in your house. I believe there were people perhaps in their farms who were producing the vegetables, the other things that needed to be eaten, and they had produced targeting to deliver them to those centers. But because of COVID, they couldn't. And even now, maybe the numbers have not picked that much. What happened to all that, production that was timed to be produced and delivered at certain time to all those eateries? Because many hotels, even now as we speak, remain closed. So for those fresh produce, spinach, carrots, tomatoes, it must be, all the various greens must have been a big challenge to our farmers who, to a large extent, obviously depended on the income from this. So COVID disrupted this to a large extent. This webinar organized by the Faculty of Agriculture also comes at a very appropriate time when we are talking about celebrating 50 years of academic excellence at University of Nairobi. And therefore it is a time to make that call for all of us to pull together all our energies, all our skills to fight hunger and poverty, to reinforce what we have done, and again start to think about what is it we need to do better as we move forward. And therefore, I'm very happy to be party or to participate in this webinar today. I want to thank the organizers and the faculty committee that was responsible for organizing this. And this is something that University of Nairobi from all faculties have taken up. We have seen many others also doing it. And it is good that the Faculty of Agriculture has also done this with this committee. And the Dean of the Faculty for offering that leadership, Professor Nyagitu. They tirelessly obviously worked very hard to put together all the panelists and the speakers for today's meeting. And we want to thank you, all of you, for coming. And I believe that the discussion that we are going to have are going to be very fruitful, and they are going to contribute to looking for solutions that we require for food and nutrition security in Kenya, and as I mentioned, in the region and the rest of Africa. I think now also it's my humble duty to invite the speaker, the main speaker, and the panelists also for this webinar. The main speaker for this webinar is Professor Linus Opara. I think I saw him in the screen here because we haven't met before, but happy he has come all the way from Stellenbosch using this new technology that we adopted as a university to give this talk. He's our main speaker today, and he is a distinguished professor at Stellenbosch University in South Africa, where he holds very senior positions. For example, DST, a National Research Fund, South Africa Research Chair. In post-harvest technology, and I know there has been a team in Kabete which has really been working on this post-harvest technology led by Professor Gina Buko and Catherine and the others. Yeah. So this is quite Linus, then you are really at home. Yeah. There are other people who have been thinking about this, doing this. They have taken me to the field to see some of the technologies they are doing. So I hope that they will share some of this information. He is also a specialist in innovative post-harvest technologies for reducing losses, maintaining quality, and adding value to agricultural and horticultural products. They have set up some technologies. When next time when we have no COVID, you come, you should get an opportunity to go and see some of the technology also set in a college. Very beautiful one. He serves on the executive committee of the International Society for Horticultural Sciences. And he is the incoming president of the International Commission of Agricultural and Biosystems Engineering. Professor Opara has contributed immensely in post-harvest loss reduction in fruit value chains in Africa, and has been a key partner and a collaborator with researchers at the University of Nairobi. Colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, join me as I welcome Professor Linus Opara to make his presentation.
Thank you, colleagues. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, we can hear
Yes,
you.
we can.
We can hear you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Barring all the technological challenges that one faces when you have this remote interaction, I just hope that we're going to have a few minutes of a very deep conversation on celebrating the 50 years of academic excellence of the University of Nairobi, but also trying to think about the next 50 years. So Mr. Vice Chancellor, the principal and principal secretary, the dean, our moderator, panelists, colleagues, friends from Nairobi, Kenya, and around the world. I want to welcome you, but also thank you for this opportunity to share some thoughts with you during this celebration here. I want to first of all start by congratulating the past and present leaders of the University of Nairobi, and in particular the Faculty of Agriculture, for the leadership you have shown in nation building, in capacity development, research and innovation that has supported policy and improvement of the lives of Kenyans and perhaps Africans at large. I do have a personal story or relationship with Kenya for some reason. Just looking at the history of the University of Nairobi, and I see that when it became the second university college in East Africa, and that happened on the year of my birth. It didn't end there. And when it became the first national university in Kenya, that also happened on my birthday. And I find that in celebrating the 50 years anniversary of the University of Nairobi coincides also with the the 50th anniversary of my wife's birthday. So there's a lot in common that I have as a family with University of Nairobi and Kenya. I should also like to point something I think is particularly relevant and important to me, I'm very passionate about. Exactly 33 years ago, as a young agricultural engineer, I was looking for places to improve my skills through higher education. And believe it or not, University of Nairobi was the one that I applied to first to do my master's in those days in the area of engineering related to agriculture. Of course, I ended up going to New Zealand, but even when I was in New Zealand, I had very good friends that enabled me to maintain close contact with what was going on the African continent and Kenya in particular. In celebrating University of Nairobi for 50 years, I should also just mention particularly the area that I work in terms of post-harvest technology, that I'm aware that University of Nairobi has provided continental leadership in furthering the cause of improved post-harvest management. And I just have to mention the effort made by our colleagues at the University of Nairobi in galvanizing continental thinking and efforts towards the first All-Africa Post-Harvest Congress, which we ended up having a second one hosted by the African Union. I think Mr. Vice Chancellor, we did meet, or maybe your representative during that particular meeting. So my colleagues like Professor Jen Ambuko and Dr. Catherine Kuyanga have been representing the faculty and the university on these very, very important issues that affect not only Kenya, but Africa as a whole, and of course the world at large. So how do we celebrate 50 years during the pandemic and COVID in particular? So we in Africa and the world at large, we are living and witnessing unprecedented times in the life of universities and humanities at large. Only 10 months ago, who would have thought the University of Nairobi would be celebrating part of its anniversary online? I think that would have been big fanfare with music and drums and dances going on the campus and around the cities of Nairobi. But we have replaced some of those things with our online interaction. This webinar is about celebrating academic excellence because University of Nairobi is a tertiary institution. So it's all about academic excellence of one of Africa's leading tertiary institutions. 50 years is a celebratory age. It is not a ripe age by several measures. If the University of Nairobi were a civil servant or an academic, it will not be due for compulsory retirement. So what does this mean? That means your work in nation building and pursuit of academic excellence may just have begun. But 50 years is also a good age to take stock, to reflect on the past successes and also ponder about the missed opportunities. 50 is surely a good age to become confident, but not arrogant. 50 is such a memorable age. After all, it's half a century. And those of you who follow cricket, when you hit a century, it's a major milestone, even a half century. So today, the world, Kenya and Africa at large is facing major existential challenges. And these challenges include climate change, extremism and terrorism, food and nutrition insecurity, and more recently, of course, pandemics have been with us for a long time in human history, but more recently, the COVID-19 pandemic has now added a new twist to the issues facing Africa, Kenya, and the world at large. COVID-19 is like no other pandemic that humanity has witnessed during the past 50 years since the formation of University of Nairobi. While Kenyans and the rest of the world were trying to find sustainable solutions to those existential problems that I've talked about, which challenge our national security and economic prosperity, we are suddenly confronted with coronavirus, COVID-19. At the peak of this global pandemic, we saw new evidence that the planet started to heal. The planet started to heal, even though momentarily. The air quality around the world, in particular polluted cities, was shown evidence of improvement. We saw photographs of wild animals strolling freely near homes along highways, especially in places like South Africa. Even the terrorists and extremists appeared to fear for their own lives and went quite, albeit momentary, silence. More than before, nations and communities agreed on the need for us to come and act together for our common destiny, the famous African spirit of Ubuntu. I am because you are. If I catch COVID, you also have a chance of catching COVID. And that's something that we have to bring to bear when we talk about the future of the universities in Africa, including the University of Nairobi. So COVID-19 opened and pointed a flashlight on our weak and unsustainable food systems. Suddenly, we could not go to farms freely. We could not go to the shops to buy food freely. All aspects of our food supply systems were affected, from supply of inputs, from production activities, post-harvest handling, preparation, service sales, and so on and so forth were affected. In some areas, the worst instincts of humanity took hold. There was food hoarding, there were price hikes, there were even stealing of food on farms and in people's homes. There was a rationing of food sales. In some markets, you could only buy 2 loaves of bread at one time. So while prices shoot off the roof, we saw rivers of fresh milk flow into waste pipelines, thousands of hectares of produce not harvested, tons of produce stored, but that rotted away. Many traders had to walk away from their produce in the markets because it was not safe to interact with people and make sales. So COVID-19 affected food and nutrition insecurity at all levels, both individual, family, community, and as a nation. There is increasing evidence that this has led to high incidence of pre-harvest losses. When you don't harvest your crop on time, of course, the incidence of diseases and pests will increase. We also do know there's emerging evidence that there is higher incidence of post-harvest losses during the pandemic. In fact, one of our graduate students recorded high incidence of losses of pomegranate fruit because the trees had to be strip harvested and they could not follow the usual traditional harvesting guidelines. So this may have led to reduced food availability and reduced access. We do know, for example, in Nigeria, Okada is a popular means of transport. And there are some families that rely on the Okada family member to go out, come back during the daytime and bring food home, and go back to do their job and come back in the evening and bring food home. And so when people were locked up in their homes, they could not carry on their business. So the pandemic brought some panic, it brought some fear, which had tremendous effects on food and nutrition security. COVID-19 also demonstrated the special case for food and nutrition security as an existential human problem. Suddenly, the demand for luxury goods and services plummeted. Car sales, holidays, new shoes, jewelries, were no longer the priorities of humankind. Some people even auctioned their luxury goods for food. Schools, churches, and mosques closed, but food markets were allowed to open even for a few hours. This is very, very important. All these important aspects of our life were allowed to close, but the food markets were allowed to open even for a short period of time. So the pandemic brought some issues to the fore in terms of human development. The need to assure food and nutrition security for all, both the poor and the rich. This is very, very important. So the issue of food security is no longer the issue of production. It becomes an issue of also access, that even if you had the money to buy, you may not be able to access the food to buy. It also raised the issue of food sovereignty, which is slightly different from food security, because nations close their borders, communities close their borders, but we also do know that we all don't produce all that we eat in our different communities. So food sovereignty became an issue. So in the future, countries have to now start to think about food sovereignty in addition to food security. So these interrelated issues about food and nutrition security combined with food sovereignty raise further questions. What is the type of agriculture that underpins our food system? How come we lose a lot more of what we already produce in an agriculture that has very high unproductivity and lacks resilience? So saving the harvest, saving the little that we have produced has now become even more important. Another related question is, which I believe demands urgent attention, is how do we ensure a sustainable and resilient food system under a pandemic? Resilience is very, very important. Resilience is not just about producing food for 10 years and then in the last 3 months of the next year, everybody goes hungry. That's a big challenge. So let me address briefly the lingering and vexing problem of the type of agriculture that is required to deliver sustainable food systems in Kenya, Africa, and the world. In my humble submission, this new agriculture must enable us achieve the Africa that we want, the Kenya that we want. We cannot separate our agriculture from the future that we hope for our children. And this is very, very important. So what is the role of a national university, a regional or continental university like the University of Nairobi? I talk about a new agriculture because I believe that both our current agriculture and food systems are badly broken. They need urgent repair. They need urgent rework to fix them if we are to realize the levels of wealth creation and prosperity needed to lift millions of Africans out of poverty. I'm talking about vicious cycle of poverty, that even those that we rely on to produce our food remain the sickest among us, remain the poorest among us. Something is wrong with that type of agriculture and food system. So to buttress this point, let's take a cursory look at some of the vexing statistics that currently surround African agriculture, which underscore the need for us to improve productivity and improve resilience. We have millions and millions of small farms that are often scattered hundreds or even tens of kilometers from each other, sometimes belonging to a family. These hinder economies of scale in modernization through productivity enhancing technologies and access to farms. In Africa, we have the lowest crop yield that is often several times less than that of the global average. This low productivity leads to low total production. So this leaves the so-called smallholder farmers, the poorest and sickest among us, to be perpetually in a vicious cycle of poverty. The poor and deplorable state of rural Africa and the smallholder farmers who predominate these rural areas is a matter of urgent concern. I consider this as a new crisis facing Africa, and I call it the rural crisis. And of course, there is a need then for us to transform agriculture and rural Africa. So over the years, many words have been used to characterize this type of agriculture. Some people call it primitive agriculture, peasant agriculture, subsistence, traditional, small scale, smallholder, low input. To me, these are just jargons that have brought a lot of confusion to African policymakers and development practitioners. We are talking about subsistence, those who cannot make a good living, those who cannot look after their families based on their practice of agriculture. Some people have even made it very popular to call our farmers poor farmers. Let us help the poor farmers. And then we have to think about this. And this is something that we have mainstreamed into the thinking of our young people, even those we call our development partners. Our farmers are meant to be poor. Why should African farmers to be poor? Why should they be characterized always with poverty? Up to around the independence of many African countries, we use the word traditional peasants and subsistence. But then suddenly around the 1970s, when we started talking about appropriate technology, and many of you will be familiar with the mantra of small is beautiful, which was popularized by Schumacher in Europe, particularly in the United Kingdom, we now started talking about small-scale agriculture. It became so popular, and that became the designation of agriculture in Africa, as if Africa is born to continuously practice small-scale and smallholder agriculture. And nobody asked what happened in Europe 200 years ago? What happened in Asia 200 years ago? These are important questions that institutions like universities should provide some thought leadership. Today, it is now all about smallholder agriculture. The so-called development partners have adopted and promoted this. African governments, policy experts, politicians, academicians like us, etc., have accepted and mainstreamed this into our development mantra, philosophy, and budgeting. No one asked the question, if this has not worked for 50 years since University of Nairobi was founded, why would it work in the next 50 years when there is global competition, increased demand, and challenge over resources? Who has actually asked the question, what actually is smallholder agriculture? Why should African agriculture be so characterized as if nothing else should work in Africa? This is an important challenge for institutions and thought leaders to help us to resolve. So one consequence of this one-size-fits-all approach, socio-economic development of agriculture in Africa, is that you will hardly succeed in getting any funding to support agricultural transformation in Africa without focusing exclusively or perhaps pretending to focus on smallholder farmers. This is something for us to think about. You must add the word smallholder. It doesn't matter what you want to do. Otherwise, these funders may not even consider your application. Nowhere else in our economy, in Kenya, in Africa, nowhere else in our economy have we brought such a bad policy of thinking to push us to the corner that we must act only in one particular way. Not in our schools. We don't talk about smallholder schools. We don't talk about smallholder hospitals. We don't talk about smallholder transportation systems. We don't even talk about smallholder churches and mosques. Africa now is known to be housing the largest growth in supermarkets and mega markets. So why don't we continue to build smallholder markets? Because our farmers are smallholder farmers. Why do we have this sprawl of supermarkets and hypermarkets all over Africa? We have them, and now we fill them with goods and services from the rest of the world because our agriculture is not productive enough. From the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations to the African Union Commission, the African Development Bank, AGRA, IFAD, CGIAR, IFPRI, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, Rockefeller Foundation, name all the players on the African development agenda. The thesis is that smallholder farmers are the future of an African agriculture. While we acknowledge the modest impacts of the investment over the past 50 years in improving the lives of Africans and farmers in particular, available evidence on the socioeconomic attributes and prospects of smallholder farmers and smallholder agriculture clearly suggests that this cannot be the future of African agriculture in the 21st global economy. Competition is the game. How can our farmers compete if we continue to do it the old way? There is no evidence that this kind of agriculture and agribusiness has been the future of any other part of the world. There's also no evidence that our children aspire for this kind of agriculture. Why do we keep promoting what we don't practice? It is time that we accept that for too long, we have backed the wrong horse. Small is not necessarily beautiful. And I will even go as far as saying that small is no longer beautiful as the overriding principle for resource allocation and investment promotion in African agriculture. When we sell or rent millions of hectares of African virgin land for farmers, for investors to invest in African agriculture, do they come and practice smallholder farming? Do they come with hoes and cutlasses? This is something we must think about. Why should the trajectory of African development follow a completely different path, different from what we know that works and that has worked around the world. After all, that is why the University of Nairobi was set up, to bring new knowledge, to bring new information, to help the country transform to a modern society and economy. It is time that we stopped romanticizing about smallholder agriculture as the future of African agriculture and food systems. So, what are the opportunities and prospects for improved food systems and better food and nutrition security during this pandemic and post-pandemic? A couple of issues I want to finish up with, Mr. Vice Chancellor. We must save Africa's harvest. The little that we produce, we must do whatever it is necessary to save it. We do know that Africa loses about 48 billion US dollars per annum on post-harvest food losses and waste. During the same time in per annum, we spend over 35 billion US dollars importing food that is often processed. The value has been added in other parts of the world, and then we spend the little resources we have on the African continent to bring them in. We need to build resilient and sustainable food systems. And that means being able to assure food security under pandemics or even during disasters. I don't know about Kenya, but I do know that here in Nigeria, there was a lot of palliatives. That is the new word that has come to the fore during this pandemic. Both at the federal government level, state and local government level, even at families and communities, people were busy putting money together to provide short-term food supply to their people. They call it palliatives. Think about it. It was about supply of food. Food and nutrition security was important. Second, we need to modernize and truly transform African agriculture from largely subsistence to a mix. This is very important, to a mixed basket of profitable, competitive, and knowledge-driven agro-enterprises that could be small, that could be medium, that could be large, that could even be mega enterprises. They don't all have to be small. Small is not always beautiful. If Africa can boast of the highest rise in the number of supermarkets, we need to ask ourselves, what will these supermarkets be selling and who will be supplying to them? There's no philosophical, moral, or economic reason why the large majority of our farms and agribusinesses must remain small and highly unprofitable. We must improve our post-harvest handling and marketing infrastructure and agro-processing to reduce losses and waste and facilitate trade and market access. The value lies down the stream. Value lies down the stream. Most people don't think about it, that when you go to the supermarket or the market and buy a loaf of bread, less than 50% of the price you pay goes all the way back to the farmer. The rest is on the other value, other practitioners in the value chain. So why should we, the majority of our people, be stuck on production and not think about value addition? Farmers make less than 15% in many places. So who makes the other 85%? We must also change and modernize the laws and regulations that govern regional trade in Africa. We know that it costs more to move goods and people within Africa. We often see truckloads of agricultural produce packed at checkpoints and borders for days and weeks, often leading to spoilage and high losses in food wastage, high food wastage. We also need to improve physical, human, and community security so that farmers, researchers, and other agribusinesses can operate freely without fear of harm, intimidation, and even death. And many of you would have heard about farmer-herder clashes in Nigeria and perhaps other parts of Africa. So what are the opportunities for University of Nairobi as an academic institution that prides itself of excellence pre, during, and post this pandemic? These opportunities lie in the core functions of a modern progressive university. The first is teaching and learning. Are we preparing our students and graduates to become lifelong learners, capable of thought leadership with skills that match the challenges facing Kenyan agriculture and food systems, and of course, Africa and the world at large? I challenge you with these direct questions as well. What is your vision of agriculture and food systems which you instill in your students? How many of your students carry out their industrial work experience with smallholder farmers in rural Kenya? Should they? And if they do, what type of impact do they make? And what type of knowledge do they bring to bear? on those smallholder farmers? How does their curricula reflect the current challenges and opportunities facing Kenyan and African agriculture? On the issue of research and innovation, are we carrying out the kind of research needed to solve the current and future problems facing agribusinesses in Kenya and Africa? If Africa is the crying baby that keeps the rest of the world awake at night in terms of food and nutrition insecurity, what kind of research and associated investments in human infrastructure capacity building are we doing? What does resilience of agriculture mean to you? What does food sovereignty mean to you compared with food security? In recent years, the University of Nairobi has shown regional leadership in the areas of post-harvest research and food security. Perhaps this is the first time, this is the right time to develop and mainstream these flagship programs. Develop these flagship programs into the future, into the next 50 years in the life of the University of Nairobi. This will help in preparing us for the next pandemic. At Stellenbosch University in South Africa, the government and the private sector have invested considerably in setting up the South African Research Year in Post-Harvest Technology. This research year has enabled us to partner with the government and agribusinesses to find cost-effective solutions to issues ranging from reducing food losses to improving packaging, storage technologies, etc., etc. More recently, we have developed novel techniques and procedures to add value to horticultural products, because we know that the horticultural produce suffer more losses than other agricultural commodities. And more recently, the South African Research in Post-Harvest Technology has been upgraded into the African Institute for Post-Harvest Technology, again, leveraging on the little success that we have recorded in the last decade. This provides new opportunity for inter-African collaboration, and I invite our colleagues at the University of Nairobi to continue to partner with us and collaborate. And finally, in closing, the success of University of Nairobi is a real cause for celebration. It has served the country and the region well in various areas, including agriculture and improvement of food and nutrition security. The ongoing pandemic has pointed the torchlight on some of the key fault lines in our food system, especially in food and nutrition security. These clearly highlight the need for a true and meaningful transformation to create a new agriculture that is sustainable, profitable, and productive. We also need a new food system that is resilient, thereby reducing the vulnerability of our farmers and our citizens when the next pandemic and disaster strikes. To achieve this, modernize and transform agriculture, Africa needs patriotic thought leadership. Kenya needs patriotic thought leadership, both in academia, politics, and industry. This is the leadership that will recognize our past, but not afraid to embrace the tremendous opportunities for a new Africa that is prosperous and at peace. This is the Africa I want. This is the new African food system that I want. I invite you to this new thinking and courage to lead. Congratulations to the University of Nairobi and the leaders for a worthy 50th anniversary. Congratulations and thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Opara, for that wonderful, really insightful guideline you have given us in agriculture, and even those who are not in need. And also nice to see you after some time. Colleagues and our students and all the others who are with us, we have a very good discussion to come in later, and I'm not going to summarize what Professor has given. I see the comments on the wall. Continue putting those comments there and questions, please, so that we can receive. We have a period where we are all going to discuss all this in context. So please keep in there. I'd like to take on the program to the next level, but I want to start off by thanking our Vice Chancellor for being present here with us in this webinar. And I do hope that Mr. Vice Chancellor, you find time to stay with us a bit longer so that you can hear the other key speakers who have come on board to share with us our 50th year celebration. I want to start off by thanking the Dean for this webinar, which is handling a very current and topical issue concerning all governments in the world, not just Kenya. As we all grapple with the COVID-19 health challenge, food and nutrition security is very crucial, as even the sick persons need the food. And not just any food, the highly nutritious food. We want to thank the Dean and his management for identifying this as being high in the agenda of the faculty. Thus, this webinar is supposed to give us insights at continental level, national level, on what strategies are in place and into the future or post-COVID pandemic. For instance, in Kenya, the agenda for security crops have been clearly identified. There is focus on this, yet the nutrition and its policies are anchored in the Ministry of Health. And for me, I'm glad that our PS is here with us to really also give us some guideline on this. We need to see the Ministry of Agriculture identifying, accompanying nutritious crops that can be given equal focus, like the carbohydrate-based crops, like what we have, rice, potatoes, maize, to just name them. It is crucial to drive technology in delivering modern technologies in this modern time. And I do hope that in this discussion, we shall hear something, not just what we have covered, how is the ministry factoring IT, especially in this very challenging time. And of course, for me, I always will focus on what insights. I'd like to pick some insights on how we are driving this agriculture, bringing on board the youth and also the women empowerment in agriculture, which is very essential for this COVID-19 survival and also recovery. Now, with those few remarks from my side, I would like now to introduce to you our speaker, Professor Hamad Mboga. Come again? Professor Hamad Mboga, your mic is off.
It was somebody else who was talking, so they need to mute. Yeah.
Okay. So I'd like to allow me to invite the PS, the Permanent Secretary, State Department for Crop Development and Agriculture Research in the Kenya government. We know he's a professor of microbiology and ecology, and also just to give a brief of his previous life, he was also the first principal and also the first vice chancellor for Taita Taveta University in Kenya. Professor Mbogo, I cannot read all your CV, but with those few remarks on you, kindly take the floor, and you have 10 minutes. It's very tough to control senior colleagues, but I would like us kindly, so that we can address what is coming on the wall. Let's hear you individually at 10 minutes, and then we can be able to raise a number of issues with you. Thank you so much. Professor, take the floor.
Thank you very much, Agnes. All protocols observed. I'm happy to join this webinar. I had a mix-up a bit because I was in a similar webinar by the University of Nairobi and FAO, I think last week. So I thought my date was done. So when Professor Nyagito was trying to look for me, I realized that there was still something to be done. I would first like to congratulate University of Nairobi on this anniversary. And I know it's the mother university here, and almost all faculties that exist now in the country and all universities have their roots and origins in the University of Nairobi. I would also like to appreciate the comments of a professor who has just spoken before me, and Professor Opara. I think his comments were quite pertinent. And I think he has captured our dilemma quite well, in the sense that, like in Kenya, almost 80–90% of our producers are smallholders. Those are these villagers and neighbors and friends who are trying their luck at farming. And they are not doing it mainly as a commercial undertaking. They are doing it as a cultural undertaking, I would say, with the commercial side being by the way. So most of the programs in the Ministry of Agriculture are targeting this. We hardly have any programs targeting large-scale farmers. And the reason why we are targeting these farmers is because we can't create enough jobs elsewhere to get the people off the land. So we have people who are farming who should not be farming just because there is no other option. Most of our employment opportunities are in agriculture, basically farming, and even the GDP reflects that 34% of the GDP is in agriculture directly, and up to 57% indirectly through the other logistical and other services that go into agriculture. So this is our dilemma. And the smallholder farmer, especially the Kenyan African smallholder farmer, is still struggling. It's very hard to transmit knowledge to smallholder farmer. I know we have tried through many programs over the years with some successes. And this reflects because it's very hard to find formal employment in the agriculture sector. So most of our agriculture graduates, either diploma or degree, they don't find employment in this sector, and that is why we are not even able to attract students, because of the informal nature of the smallholder agriculture. So as we struggle to try and commercialize this, I like the question posed by Professor Opara, that how do we get ourselves out of this situation where we commercialize, we consolidate, and we focus on large-scale production. I think some of the crops, it doesn't make sense to grow them as smallholder, like maize. It doesn't make sense to grow maize, and I've been saying this, I get a lot of criticism, but I've come to the realization that somebody on less than 20 acres, they can't get out of poverty, especially with the inability to mechanize and the inability to increase productivity. For example, for maize, our productivity is 1.7 metric tons per hectare instead of the continental maybe 4 or 5 metric tons per hectare, the European 6 metric tons per hectare, the American 12 metric tons per hectare. So you find we are because of the system, we are quite inefficient. And so this is a big challenge for us because it's what is there. And it's not just maize that we have handled this way. Even coffee, the plantations have given way to bushes. We were trying to do a support program for coffee. We thought we would find quarter acres. We didn't find quarter acres. We found somebody with 20 bushes, no, 100 bushes, something like that. Not an acre, not quarter an acre. And because of subdivision and encroachment on some of these agricultural land. So I think we must admit that the policies we adopted, where we thought about settling people, giving people land, and not controlling to make sure that there is no subdivision of agricultural land, I think they were misguided, and I think we need to revisit that and see how to consolidate. And because of the spiritual attachment to land by Kenyans, somebody will die with their 1/8 or even smaller than that, rather than think about consolidation, cooperation, and moving away from actually farming to having managers farm these small farms as consolidated units professionally. So it's very hard. We are trying to bring such a program under coffee to see if we can have qualified graduates from SMEs that can work on like 100-acre parcels through consolidation, so that the owner of the farm is a shareholder, but they don't have to go and spend their time on that quarter an acre and earn nothing. The same with tea. So I think the smallholder problem has been well captured. But even with the smallholder problem, we realize as we were doing our agriculture sector transformation and growth strategy, the problems are still very basic. Despite all the years of investments, the problems are still very basic. They don't test the soil. So they buy the wrong fertilizer. They buy the wrong seeds for the wrong place. And they use probably very poor chemistry in the management of pests and diseases. And the soil, because of the husbandry, has become acidic. And all these other challenges that are associated with the farming system. One time I went to Gatundu, some areas of Gatundu there, to look at the VBA, Village-Based Advisor Extension Model. And what I saw was that farmers there who receive about 90 days of rain were growing maize that requires 120 days of rain. So in the end, the maize could not mature. And yet there are varieties of maize that have been developed over the years that can do 60 days, that can do 90 days, and the information is not flowing. So that talks about a broken extension system. In Kenya, we run a devolved government, so agriculture is devolved. So extension is at the county level, but we realize that is also not working. But I tie it to the smallholder model. When I visit a large-scale farmer, they know what to do. They know where to get money. They know which product to use. They know the seasons. They have all the information. They are running a business. They know how to enter a market. But our smallholder farmer, we have a lot of work to do. And the ministry in its strategy is still focusing on those smallholder farmers as an inclusion pillar, because we have to hold them. Otherwise, we have more people slide into poverty. And I think part of the challenge is how do we hold them? How do we commercialize them? How do we bring in younger people? Because the large percentage of them are 60 years and above, while the Kenyan consumer is 17 years on average. So I think that is for the system and mainly to respond. But during the time of COVID, the same smallholder farmer with their inefficiency and their struggles, they are still sustaining most of our production. So until we bring a better system, which we are trying to do, right now we are focusing on creating some large-scale farms. We've been discussing with some of your professors there in Kabete to see if Kebwezi farm can be turned into a large-scale farm, not for research only, but also for commercial production, but also the Galana Kulalus and the land under Kadro, the land under ADC, the land under other public entities that have more than 1,000 acres, turning this to large-scale farmers, because what was there is gone, and the only thing that is left is this public land that is under some of the institution. So there is a policy paper that is coming as part of the strategy to turn this into production areas with agro-processing facilities, and hopefully link the smallholder farmers to this production system. And it's in our strategy that we launched last year. Now, when COVID happened, we were in the middle of implementing this strategy. So it knocked off a bit because we had started like 6 months of implementation, and you have seen the reforms that are coming in different areas of agriculture. It's because of this strategy. When COVID happened, we realized it was going to be a food crisis. We knew it was a health crisis, but it was going to be a food crisis, and that would make it double worse. Because if people in Kibera could not get food, there was no containment measures you could apply there. They would come out. They would come out. So that worried us. And because of the lockdowns and so on and so forth, we realized we needed data about the major staples, the major foods. We needed data about the people who are most vulnerable. And we quickly scrambled a team and created what was known as a food security war room, where we could gather all this information to support decision making. And from there, we could make guidelines that enabled us to manage the situation. So that is why we knew where the food was. We knew there was enough food. We knew how long it would last. We allowed for a 2 months importation window for maize because we knew how long it would take. We knew for 9 commodities what the situation was. We knew the markets which were open. We knew the markets which were closed. And we developed guidelines for all value chain actors, from production to input suppliers, all the way to the markets, to make sure that the system remained open, and it largely remained open. We tracked prices for all that period. Up to now, we are still tracking. The prices stabilized and then they went down. Now they are ticking up a bit, but largely we avoided a crisis because we had this food security war room where all of us, including the private sector players, were in making decisions and planning together, and we have adopted this system for the long term for any other crisis. In the middle of this crisis, we were also wrestling with a locust crisis, which is the worst invasion in 70 years. And working with FAO, World Bank, and African Development Bank, we managed to bring the locust invasion under control. Right now, we have 1 or 2 swarms out there, but I think we'll manage it. We have worked with the University of Nairobi on this. Some of the people from Kabete were in the initial discussions about how to approach all this issue. There we have leveraged technology, especially digital mobile technology. We had a locust 3M mobile app to track and help us in forecasting the movement of locusts and also tracking where they could lay eggs and using satellite technology based on soil analysis and moisture content analysis. But largely, we also managed that crisis. So we had 2-3 crises at the same time, including floods, right in the middle of the COVID. So we have built a system that is resilient. Finally, on the issue of going into the future, out of the COVID and out of just our agriculture sector and transformation strategy, we have embraced digitization of agricultural data information and some of the solutions that we are presenting to farmers. The ministry launched recently a digitization strategy, and it has 7 use cases. And some of them have to do with incentives, how we manage our incentive program to farmers. It's digitized, so you'll never hear us buying fertilizer again. The issue of the food balance sheet is digitized so that we can know at any one given time how much food is around, how much is coming in, how much is going out, how much is being produced, how much is in the market, and the issue of pricing. Also, extension. We have an extension platform 40130, where you just send an SMS farm and then you can interact with it. And we also have an agro-weather information system at Calro, together with the KMD, funded by World Bank, to provide agro-weather information so that our farmers can farm in a smart way. And of course, we have a land optimization model as a strategy to make sure that we use the land for what it's most suitable for. We don't grow maize in Mandera and grow coffee in Mombasa, so that we grow the right crop in the right environment. I think in the past, we have grown maize everywhere, and that is part of the problem. And some of the colleagues in the University of Nairobi, like Orodi or Diambo, have been very useful in catalyzing some of these discussions. And we hope more of the professors there can come and interact with us. We are here, I'm a professor, I've been in the university, I understand your language, and we can come and drive a different narrative than what has been going on before. I think, like Professor Opara has said, we have to throw the box out and start rethinking and challenging some of the narratives that we have fed on for many years, that have seen a system declining and declining. And as we move forward, I'm committed to working with all institutions to make sure that we realize this. So thank you very much. And there are opportunities here at the ministry, there are opportunities in the agriculture sector. And I think for some time, it will continue to be the major employer. and we should encourage the graduates who are coming out of there to be the farmers of the future, to create the jobs, the formal jobs in the farming sector by just embracing medium-sized and large-scale farming, which we are very keen to support at the policy level. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Mboge, for that wonderful guidance you have given us. I see questions coming up on the chat, and continue writing because we'll pick some so that they can be responded to. Allow me now to move to the next speaker. I know it's not easy, but you'll bear with us. I cannot stop the PS from talking because I could see we need to hear from him on what they are doing at the ministry. So allow me now to introduce Dr. Nicholas Ozo, who is currently the Executive Director of the African Technology Policy Studies Network, in brief ATPS, Nairobi, Kenya here, where he has worked for over 10 years. Dr. Ozo has led and is currently leading many internationally funded research projects bordering on science, technology and innovation, natural resource management, innovation systems, climate change, development issues, policy development, analysis and advocacy, technology management and transfer, and private sector engagement, amongst the many. It's very difficult to kind of abbreviate the CV of these eminent colleagues, but I think with that a brief on Dr. Ozo, I would like to welcome him to now take the floor. The time is 10, but I'm being generous to allow 1 or 2 minutes above. Thank you. Welcome, Dr.
Thank you very much, Professor Agnes Mangombe, our moderator. Let me also, first of all, congratulate the University of Nairobi on their 50 years anniversary, and as well thank the guest speaker, Professor Linus Opara, my own brother, for that well-articulated paper. When I was invited or informed about this to be a panelist, I immediately said, well, this will be a great opportunity for me to view the issues of the impact of COVID-19 on food systems and food nutrition security from the policy lens, which is one of the key areas of work that we do here at the ATPS as a leading policy research think tank in Africa. So permit me to align most of my perspectives on issues bordering mostly on policy. First of all, I will start with the impacts, because the paper or the theme looks at impact of the COVID-19. So I have grouped my talk in three parts. So I've looked at the impacts of this COVID at the national level, being here in Kenya, and also at the international level, as well as try to talk about the opportunities that this COVID bring for us on board. So, and like I said, my intervention is coming mainly from a policy lens. First of all, when this pandemic hit the country, Kenya, there were a lot of strugglings because, of course, we know that there's no doubt that the pandemic took everyone by surprise, both at individual level, institutional level, and systemic level, as well as at local, national, continental, and global levels. So the quickest reaction that government made was there was a shift in emphasis from most sectors, including agriculture, to the health sector. So in Kenya, for instance, just prior to the COVID-19 pandemic, as the PS had said, the government efforts were focused on combating the low-cost invasion in the country and in the region as a whole. But this emphasis dwindled and was almost lost entirely immediately the COVID came in, because it was like, this is now the matter of the moment. Actually, I never heard about it. I saw it in the national tele again, as we usually see it. All issues now shifted attention to the health sector. Secondly, at the national level, there was this quick reallocation of resources in terms of human and material, including funds from other sectors, including agriculture, to also health sector, because we felt that that is now the matter of the moment, and therefore every fund in other sectors that we are still not being utilized, we are pushed to the health sector. In short, in some other countries, there was direct procurement. I mean, the procurement processes were no longer followed, because they treated COVID as a matter of the moment, and therefore we could not follow procurement processes anymore, so as to be able to meet up with speed with the ravaging impact of the COVID-19. Again, as if that was not enough, the lockdown effects on production, processing, manufacturing, entertainment, hospitality, transportation industries were affected, leading to food price escalations, loss of jobs, food wastages, high cost of food. These were all emphasized by the keynote speaker, and this was very true. And because of that, there were problems. And to combat this, some of these impacts, government released transportation of goods and services related to agriculture, so as to allow for food security, that is availability, access, and utilization. So there was this lifting in ban of movement of food products from one county to the other, so as to evade serious impact of food crisis, which the PS also alluded to. So these were some of the immediate impacts we had at the national level in Kenya and some other countries. Let me a little bit move to the international level. Firstly, at the international level, most international treaties and protocols and frameworks that aim to create a single continental market for goods, services, and free movement of persons and capital, as well as those that aim to boost intra-Africa trade, contributing to sustainable economic development and structural transformation, and facilitating industrialization through diversification and the development of regional value chains and agricultural production, we are seriously affected. To mention but a few, we could see, we know what the provisions of the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement mean to us, and we know the provisions, but they were affected. We know what Agenda 2063 says, but it was affected at this time. The Program for the Infrastructural Development of Africa was affected. The Action Plan for the Accelerated Industrial Development for Africa was affected. The Action Plan for Boosting Intra-Africa Trade was affected, including that of CADEP and the pillars therefrom. So this really got everybody in panic, and both at the national and the international level. So the closure of the airspace and the ban of international travels affected movement of food products across countries, and also affected food importation and exportation. Therefore, both net food importers and net food exporters suffered. the closure of land borders due to the increasing rate of international transmissions of the COVID-19. For instance, we've seen borders between Kenya and Tanzania, borders between Tanzania and most other East African countries closed, Kenya and Uganda, and so on and so forth, because of the fact that countries rated blame games on each other on this transmission. And this caused a lot of policy realignments, policy changes, and making of a lot of declarations. So let me quickly now use the remaining minute to talk about opportunities. Whereas these things happened, whereas we were in panic, whereas there were food hikes and shortages and wastages and so on and so forth, there remained some people who were also making exploits, and which also offered us a lot of opportunities. And I categorized the opportunities into 5. 1, research opportunity. 2, investment opportunity. 3, collaborations and partnerships. 4, trade. And finally, policy. On research level, at the research level, call it research and extension, since the striking of the COVID-19 pandemic, there has been an outburst of research endeavors in the food and nutrition, health, and COVID-19 nexus. So there have been a lot of calls, there have been a lot of research requests to know how the impact of COVID is, how it is affecting our food system, how it's affecting nutrition, and so on and so forth. So the result of these research efforts will generate, for sure, tremendous adaptation measures, or what Linus was referring to, resilience. Resilient measures on how to maintain sustainable food system during and post-COVID era periods. One such research effort is the one spearheaded by the African Union's Scientific Research and Innovation Council, ASRIC, which, of course, the University of Nairobi is opportuned to have their own very own Professor Ratemo Michieka as the chair of ASRIC Council. And in this endeavor, 6 research groups or task force groups were established by the African Union to pursue research agenda relating strictly to food and nutrition security. The first task force was focusing on food and nutrition security in light of COVID pandemic and beyond, with respect to identifying and conducting situational analysis on the food and nutritional security in Africa. The second one was focusing on identification and review of guidelines for in-country and transboundary movements of food and agro products. The third task force by the African Union on this was on mitigating the impact of COVID-19 pandemic on components of Africa's food system by examining the consequences of COVID-19 on Africa's food system. The fourth one was looking at promotion and domestication of agribusiness and product development opportunities in the realm of science, technology, and innovation. And the University of Nairobi also have the opportunity to have their own Jane and Buko leading this particular work package. The fifth work package or task force team was looking at capacity audit on continental research and training responsiveness to uncertainties in food, nutrition security, and sustainable agriculture. And the final work package was looking at the enabling environment and is led by the ATPS, my organization. And we will develop the policy guidelines that will address the current and future challenges to food and nutrition security on the continent through advocacy and sensitization campaigns, and as well as other capacity building endeavors. The second one is on investment. High food prices, as an opportunity, of course, high food prices, which we are witnessing, will push up prices of agricultural commodities and hence attract more investors in this sector. Because, of course, the forces of the demand and supply is going to make people to invest more in agricultural production to be able to meet the demand. So more money will be paid for farmers goods and services, and hence increase their income and in their pockets. Collaboration and partnerships. There will be increased partnerships among governments, researchers, including university researchers, and the industry in the food value chain. I've had the PS make it clear here that his office is open to all these actors so that there will be increased collaboration between his government or his ministry with all these other actors to ensure sustainable food production and utilization. Next is trade as an opportunity. Countries with good infrastructure for agricultural development and who are net exporters of food commodities will get a boost in the agricultural contribution to their GDP, while countries who are net importers may face food crisis situation and become more vulnerable to food and nutritional security issues. So where does Kenya belong here? So if Kenya is a net exporter, this is the time they will make more gains and increase their agricultural contribution to GDP, and as well as livelihood opportunities for their people. But I said that this will be prefaced by good infrastructure. We need to have the infrastructure in place. We need to have the systems in place for production. We need to have the technologies, which the PS has also mentioned. And so if all these are well and put in place, then good luck. Kenya will rake in lots of money within the region because they will make more money through exports. Finally, on policy opportunities, the above situations call for countries like Kenya to quickly put in place enabling policies and frameworks to support research, investment, collaborations, and partnerships, as well as beneficial trade incentives, among other things, in the agricultural sector during and in the post-COVID era. My organization, the African Technology Policy Studies Network, we are open to collaborate and partner with the government in ensuring that policies that are inclusive, are designed, and also as well implemented. We have supported the government and still doing it. Today I had a meeting with the World Bank officials in my office, and we are talking about how to finalize the Kenya's science, technology, and innovation policy, which is currently being revised before its gazettement. So the new agriculture model, the rethinking around smallholderness in African agricultural system, which our brother Linus had mentioned, can only happen if we have a convivial policy environment. And this is the role, and I'm very happy that the PS is here, that unless all these things we are talking about, unless you create the enabling environment, nothing will happen. We have a popular slogan in my office and around our circle, where we say that politics is superior to science. No matter what you are, as a scientist, a politician who may not know as much as you do may just rubbish whatever thing you have done as a scientist because he has the political power. And therefore, we must ensure that we key into the political system to make our objectives known and get our targets. So policy is very important, and we can only achieve the aim of sustaining our research efforts, sustaining our competitiveness, if the policy is ripe, if the policy is okay, if the enabling environment is conducive for researchers to play in, to collaborate. And on this note, I want to once again thank the management of the University of Nairobi, led by the Vice Chancellor, and as well as the other colleagues here, Professor Catherine Kunyanga, the Dean, Moses, and my own brother, Professor Linus. I want to thank all of you for this opportunity given me, not forgetting my indefatigable Professor Agnes Magombe, who is always there at any time. Thank you very much for the opportunity, and God bless.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ozo, for the presentation you have made with a focus towards policy. Please allow me to call upon our last presenter, hang in with your questions there, and let them continue coming as I introduce the next guest. Professor Gabriel Okafor is a professor of food processing engineering in the Department of Food Science and Technology in the University of Nigeria, Nsukka. He also chairs the East Central chapter of the Nigerian Institute of Food Science and Technology. He's also the head of the Department of Food Science Technology in the University of Nigeria, Nsukka. Professor, take the floor. As I've said before, it's not easy to really summarize what a professor is holding, but kindly take the floor and take us through. You're most welcome.
Yes, thank you, Professor Agnes Mwagumbe, our moderator. So I wish to thank the University of Nairobi for inviting me to participate in this very strategic webinar, not only for the developing the food system, but for the excellence that part that the university has taken all these years. So the Vice Chancellor, Professor Steven Kayama, truly I've interacted with you somehow. You displayed the stuff you are made of. We are organizing collaborative research work with University of Kenya, and my boss made contact, and in no time you furnished us with relevant material. So we are grateful. The Dean, Professor Moses, Professor Linus Opera, the main speaker, the other panelists, the Dr. also the Executive Director, my brother, and Professor Buffer, other principal officers of the university, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, and Dr. Catherine Kayanga Nkirote. I call her Nkiru because it just resembles one of our local names here in Nigeria. Well, the topic has been discussed sufficiently well. The introductory parts, we know what COVID is and the disruptions it has caused. So I will go straight to the point. The area I will emphasize most will be will be opportunities, because you really discussed, I don't want to bore us. So the essence is to make sure that food is on our table for a long time, and the quality should be such that it will maintain health. So that's just the thing. And we need to protect ourselves in the course of doing this. So noticing that the producers and the food producers, the farmers, and the processors, they indulge in so much activities to make sure that the food gets to us. Their conditions should be well taken care of. So, well, I won't talk about disruption. It's been discussed a lot, but it should be strategic that we follow the course of my discussion. So recession is there already. I wouldn't say much about that. Let's go further. Are you seeing my slide? Hello? Okay. So
Yes, Prof. Yes, yes.
Good. So the missing link in the whole thing, apart from recession and co, we are dealing with COVID. So according to World Health Organization, you see, coronavirus is very stable in a frozen state. And also the SARS-CoV and MERS-CoV, the one we are familiar with in those days, can stay on for a few days on surfaces, depending on temperature. And so this gives us worry, even though other studies, considering that COVID is like an aerosol in nature, it has been observed to remain on surfaces up to 72 hours on plastic and stainless steel. These are materials and tools we use for food processing. So what should happen at the end of the day? Then copper. And then on cardboard, it is also there for 24 hours. So you see, we have some element of concern there, even though they keep saying that because they keep saying that coronavirus food doesn't transmit coronavirus. That's what they've been saying. But if assuming the conditions for transmittance is there, if the temperature is around 27, well, or below 27, and the droplet was there, it was still fresh, hasn't been, the duration of its viability has not been dissipated, then what happens if the food is ingested? Then that's another understanding, because the COVID itself is a respiratory disease, but the other pathogenic disease we are familiar with that could cause disease if it's ingested. So those ones are also there. So in the we still have to play safe. So that's why we have to truly adopt all the necessary measures to make sure that the food coming to us is of enhanced quality. So, well, food security is all about this physical access to food, quality, and so on and so forth. Now, we have to undertake the opportunities that we need to put in place for us to truly harvest in time to come. So, well, the keynote speaker has spoken a lot about enhancing agricultural productivity. You know, this small scale. Now we'll be talking on how do we make plan to mechanize our agricultural farms. You see, so with the government be able to provide needed materials, finance to provide this thing, so that the small scale farmers can now transform to large scale farmers. So the bottom line is to enhance productivity, because it would help to drive the price downward trend. So that's just the thing. Of the harvest too, he mentioned about it during COVID time. We could not harvest because probably workers were not there, leading to food losses. So what should be done? We need to upgrade those facilities to enable us. Then after harvest, what happened? Next is transportation. It's a very big challenge And that's why food gets wasted a lot. Those periods there were some major lockdown, even though government permitted food movement, but in actual sense, some truck drivers were afraid to even enter the road because of incessant attacks on the road. So that's a big challenge that need to be removed. Then weather condition, the hygienic state of the truck, and so on and so forth, all these need to be looked into. Then under transportation too, there are so many embargoes attached to transportation of not just food items during COVID, but also those facilities, machinery that will help in processing, or the spare parts. Those ones are considered not to be essential, but indirectly, they affected the very food we are trying to produce or move or distribute. So those barriers should be fully understood and then removed by the government. Now, we cannot do all these things without engaging people. So that aspect, we have to make sure the work environment is more than safe. And then with that, there will be, if the faculty in the University of Nairobi in charge, if the Department of Food Science, for example, or the Faculty of Agriculture in general, we have so much role to play in this scheme. We have to work out new systems to address the present economic challenge and then propose it to the stakeholders for uptake and need to be promoted strictly. Now, but the employers on their own, they should make sure that the workers are safe and they don't help in transmitting diseases that could affect humans. Then factory-based interventions are also there. What to do at this period to make sure that we have quality food and then the price is well moderated and the quality is acceptable, can withstand any disease outbreak too. So they are listed here. There are so many of them, but above all, for the factories to be able to implement these things, they need palliatives, what we call palliatives. Now, the main speaker, he spoke about that, but at the level of industry that have closed down for so long, and for them to put in place those things that will ensure safety, they need so more resources. And at the same time, maintaining factory hygiene even more than they used to do, that all this requires money. Workplace control is also very strategic, pre-screening of staff before they enter the facility. Personal hygiene, and then even adopting technologies that minimize human touch, contact with the food. Those things the government could invest in such things so that, but at the same time, it will provide shortage of, employment opportunities. So we need to be balanced. So other opportunities, they've mentioned that they need to go into product development by the executive director of ATPS. Yes, that is very strategic, especially this period. We need to boost the immune system of the people. And as a result, so the departments concerned need to indulge in developing immune boosting products or developing a balanced diet that could be done using extrusion technology or drone drying, whatever. So the technology that is available to compound food that could be considered as a balanced diet that will be taken as ready to eat, put in ready to eat form, or canned food outright if the facilities are there. Now, vitamin D has been identified as very strategic to managing COVID. To building immunity too. So vitamin D rich food should be promoted, processed, and transformed in the way that the shelf life will be somehow very acceptable, so that it will help to enhance food security in relation to this very strategic food. Then policy about fortifying food with vitamin D will also be useful for companies in Kenya. In Nigeria, for instance, when we had challenges of eye diseases by certain population in the country, either because of the environment or because of their feeding habits, the government introduced vitamin A, mandatory fortification of flour with vitamin A, sugar with vitamin A, oil with vitamin A, because it's believed that you consume vitamin A either through oil or through sugar or through flour, form of bread or baked product. So that's the government opportunity to intervene in this area by adopting the necessary policy statement. Next is innovation in the food chain, the reselling system, things like that. So, creating social activities that may help to reduce shortfall or access to labor while guaranteeing worker safety is also another strategic distance, because we are not primarily in the production. We don't know what the experience in getting labor to enhance their production. So that too is a challenge if we want to boost availability of processed food. Then we have to think of increasing the flexibility of labor sourcing and timing. With the COVID challenge, you may not need to have the whole workers together, messing up with the physical distancing requirement. Some companies have adopted more than one or two shifts or 3 shifts to make sure that the workers are not endangered. So that's also innovation in, a form of innovation in the food production. And where possible, we have said that already, introducing hygiene-driven processes that minimize interaction between workers and the food. Then next is digital innovation is already emphasized by the PA. He talked about using online activities to reach out to or conduct studies and reach out to customers, which is very, very strategic. Now, conducting the business by the food processors in a slightly newer plane or grounds, you discover having to meet the demand through online activities. And from there, the supplies, whatever the e-marketing, e-trading, and things like that will be very, very useful. And researchers too should be able to reach out to industries to be able to take up their technologies. And by so doing, they will also get feedback to enable the researcher to either improve on the technology or otherwise. And the companies can also contract the researchers to generate superior technology. Then in my country, for example, before a product will be allowed to be distributed within the country. If it's processed, you need the registration, okay, by National Agency for Food and Drug Administration called NAFDAC. So I happened to work in that organization for about 5 years before going to the university. You cannot, as a manufacturer, start marketing your product without such registration. And oftentimes it takes time. So the innovation we eventually adopted was to simplify the process, making it possible to register within 2 months. While it was very acceptable in my country, it may not be acceptable in other countries. So work out ways for reducing whatever time it takes to get companies to come out with their product or launch novel product without stress. Finally, well, an area of reducing food waste, which Professor Linus Obara emphasized. If we take the bull by the horn, we discover that there are so many other things associated with that. You know, responsible purchasing of food is very, very crucial to minimizing losses. So how do we educate people to purchase those things that will not go wasted? And then devising efficient ways of distribution, because food may be clustered in one location and going at very low price, whereas it's not available in the other place, costing enhanced price. So I had the government official forgotten mentioning that they are also indulging in price control and studying, and so that's in the right direction. Or to make sure that well, if there are food systems that need to be strengthened, that will make the processing into finished products very easy to accomplish. By so doing, food security will be attained. That's the major challenge that many African countries are having because they don't have food reserves. Any natural calamity or any, okay, assuming there is nuclear war today, how many of us will really survive it? Because everything would have been contaminated. But if it's processed and stored in such a way that it will not be contaminated by anything, an outbreak of such event, that would be a reserve for the people, how to balance the natural calamity or event. So processing of excess produce is the way to go. So how do governments stimulate so many people to go into food processing? And when they go into food processing and they don't have adequate raw materials, that's also another problem, which is supporting what the keynote speaker has said earlier, that the farmers should no longer be considered as peasants or poor farmers. Now let's empower them to produce, and also let's empower companies to process. Thank you so much for the opportunity given. I once again wish to congratulate the university for their 50th anniversary celebration. My university today too is having the Founders Day, about 60 years to existence. So I congratulate all. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Professor Okafor. Probably you can exit. You can remove the presentation. Kindly.
Just a minute.
Just
okay. Stop share. Yeah, I'm stopping the share. Yes.
Thank you so much. Now, colleagues, I know we've gone in deep into so many things beyond the 10 minutes. Dean, the 10 minutes were never respected. So I think is all of us senior colleagues, we always have more to say that what is the allocated time. But we really don't want to take too much time. There's a lot on the wall that has come through. And I do know some of our senior colleagues, I hope they are still in the meeting, and there are a number of questions. So I'd like to thank all the presenters, but I would like to ask, anybody asking the question is only one question or one comment, and preferably if it's a comment, please put it on the chat wall, so that we leave this moment to specific questions which have come through or which you have. And I'm not going to, I want to limit this to max, use half a minute, and we collect, direct it to a specific person. And I wanted to be systematic and start off as the presenters have talked, so that each of them gets max 2 questions. Anything else on the chat wall? Does anybody have a question to our Vice Chancellor if he's still in this meeting room?
Moderator, Professor Mongombe?
Yes.
Kindly, Professor Mboga is exiting. Maybe you can take one question before he leaves.
2 questions, because I've seen quite a number on the chat wall directed to him. So, Professor Mboga, please. Only 2 questions to Professor Mboga, and I've seen some from the youth. Any
Maybe
questions?
you can start by, moderator, maybe you can start by responding. How do we achieve economies of scale, but how do we proceed to consolidate the small pieces of land for the smallholders in the country, as an example? I know you talked about coffee, but how do we proceed in the small scale farms with our small scale holders?
Yeah, I can't see the chat right now because I had gone out, so I've come back. I don't see the questions on the chat, but it requires a lot of conversation because of the emotive nature of land. I have been to some of the most productive places like Shimba Hills in Kwale recently, which were very productive in the past, and they used to be like the bread baskets that fed Kunda and Mombasa and its environs. Right now, most of the old generation has died. Most of the young generations have moved to towns. They are telephone farmers. So the productivity levels are not being achieved. So this is a completely different conversation, and because it's very political, nobody wants to talk about it really. That's why people are moving to land that is held by public institutions so that we can begin the process there. This is understandable. I think at some point, if we achieve a certain level of economic development and jobs are there and people move into towns, probably the affinity to land will reduce and people will be willing to consolidate and co-own the land with the other partners and put them under management, under some form of management in production. But I really request that you allow me to leave because the others are calling, and I had promised them I would join them at 4, and it's already 4. And I don't see the other question. The only other question that I saw was about nutrition. Yes, yes.
Mr. Pierce, there is a follow-up question on that land consolidation, where the youth have requested who is going to own this land after it is consolidated. Or
I'm finishing.
Parcel. It's somewhere on the chart.
Yeah, I think the issue is you could still own the land just the way you own shares, but you never manage the companies. You have shares in Safaricom and you own them and they bring you dividends, but they are managed by professional people and they are able to make profit because of that. there's a group of farmers called AgVenture. AgVenture is a company that manages a group of farms in Timau, and the owners just wait for dividends because they have left the management to professional people. Now, with my mother has 12 acres. I know she can't even make 100,000 shillings out of those 12 acres because she doesn't know how to manage it professionally. And ours is a settlement scheme of 120 farmers, 120 farms, that is almost 200 acres. If managed professionally, it could bring more income to these farmers than if they manage it themselves. This is the conversation we need to have. And this way we create jobs for the agriculture graduate, because there would be real work to be done on the farm and also within the value chain. So it's a question of owning, yes, but managing, let it be managed professionally, and let the professional managers, as they make profit, also pay themselves and give you your dividends. But this requires a cultural mind shift that is very difficult to imagine. But in China, they are doing it. We actually went to look at the model in China, and they consolidated all their small rice farms into something that looks like a big plantation, but actually they own the shares based on their acreage. But this, I have tried to have this conversation here. It's also difficult within the ministry because people cannot imagine it. But it's the way to go. Otherwise, the land will not be used optimally because the people tilling the land, they don't have the capacity and we can't train them. Even some of our programs we try to do here, when we go back after some time, maybe you left somebody with a chicken house funded by World Bank, they have put the second wife there. And the purpose for which it was put, it has been abandoned. So, so that is the situation. And he says the chicken house is better than my house. So that's why I did this. And it's a difficult conversation, but if we really want to use the land optimally, we have to have youth form SMEs that can run this, can mechanize. Ethiopia is doing it with coffee. And that is why their coffee production has gone to 400,000 metric tons. Professor, I request that you allow me to eject.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that you did offer you will be interacting with the Faculty of Agriculture because yes, I've seen hands and I've also seen questions. So I believe through our dean, they'll reach out so that we can have a better conversation with you as we talk of this new revolutionary way of handling land in Kenya. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Colleagues, I think what is on the chat there, let's continue consolidating that to move it to the dean. I believe we'll still reach out to the ministry because these are things which are going to impact all of us, and they are having eyes on our own land in Kibwezi. So can we have other questions? Dean, you heard me. Can we have other questions, please? To the other speakers who I want to sincerely thank.
Yes, let us.
2 questions per speaker, kindly. And you indicate so that I know who is. Can we have directed to Professor Opara, kindly? I believe, is our Vice Chancellor still in the meeting? Mr.
Professor?
Yes?
Professor Mungombe? Professor Agnes? Professor Opara, he receives another question. Maybe he can respond on the question of partnership. The partnership you talked about in South Africa between governments and the university.
In response to the partnership, since we are allocating 2 per person, can we get a second question so that when Professor takes the floor, he finishes with them? Do we have any other question to Professor Opara? Okay.
Well, I could ask one.
Thank you. Principal, yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, since the emergence of COVID-19, there have been several myths of let's eat this, let's eat that, and that will control COVID and so on. Has anyone tried to capture all the myths and then analyze if there is any substance in them, in that actually that is the way even the medicines, the modern medicines have been developed. When some time back, some prisoners were being fed on unpolished rice when the important people were on polished rice. Now the important people were getting sick, the prisoners were not. So it was discovered that there were vitamins in the unpolished rice. So in this case now, there are myths to the extent that something like lemons, before COVID in Nairobi, one would buy a lemon for 1 shilling, but now a lemon is at least 20 shillings for one very ugly one, not even the best of them. So there is some myth about them, not just lemons, several things. If only we care to check with the markets, but have we collected all these myths and analyzed them? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And Professor Mburu, is your question directed to Professor Opara? You are muted. Professor Mburu, your hand is up. Okay. I think Professor Opara, go on.
Yeah, thank you very much. Can you hear me, colleagues?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Yes, yes, yes.
Thank you. So maybe I'll give one example about the partnerships, just to demonstrate what is possible if we can get it right in a particular situation. When I arrived in South Africa about 12 years ago, a couple of weeks later, I got a message that a couple of business people wanted to come and see me. And the first person was a pomegranate fruit grower. Pomegranate is one of those fruits, ancient. You find it in the Bible, in the Quran, originated in the, some part of the Middle East or the Persian Gulf. And she proposed to me that they had read some articles about the work I had done when I was living in the Middle East, in Oman, and that their trees of the new plantings of this crop were just about 4 or 5 years old and were going into production. And they wanted to see how they could work with my lab, my new post-harvest lab, to help them access markets globally. So a week after that as well, another person came and saw me, and that his company was bringing the planting materials, the same cuttings of pomegranate, both from Israel, from India, from Turkey, from all over the world. And people are beginning to remove some parts of their apple orchards or pears planting pomegranate because they thought there was a global market for it. And the question was how I could work with them. Now, the initial funding that we actually got to work on pomegranate post-harvest handling improvement for market access, we got that money from a company that was bringing in planting materials. My lab was on post-harvest. So we were able to make a case of some value proposition to the company that we could provide some new innovation after them funding some research for 2 to 3 or 4 years that can help them to understand better storage technologies, better packaging, and also shelf life extension. So they provided the first money that we got that we actually invested in the lab. Incidentally, one of the graduate students that I actually offered scholarship was from Kenya. In the end, she couldn't come for some reason. So that is just one. I'm going to explain that a bit more. Then the second one was the government of South Africa had a discussion with the private sector. And what I mean by private sector, farmers. And I keep talking about consolidation of farmers coming as a group. And this is the fruit farmers. And the idea was that they needed a bit more innovation to help them maintain the existing markets, local and internationally, but access new ones. And the level of funding they were generating among themselves was not enough for them to support research in universities and their companies. So there was a discussion between the Fruit Growers Association and the Department of Science and Technology. What came out of that was that the government and the private sector set up what they call the Post-Harvest Innovation Fund. And the government proposition was that for every rand they put in that fund, that the private sector must also put a rand. And then researchers could now apply to solve practical problems facing farmers and post-harvest operators. And the government did that. And I can tell you that program is now running now for the last 12 or 15 years. What is the outcome? How did it work? It came out because the farmers were able to put money where their mouth is. And that is that. So this is the issue I keep talking about. So, you know, if those farmers were not making money, or they didn't see the potential to make money, they will probably be asking for more money for them to eat at home. But these are now farmers who saw the opportunity to make more money by investing in research, and they came into a partnership with the government to set up, you can check it online, the Post-Harvest Innovation Fund. So the private sector put in money. Due to the success of this fund in the fruit industry, the vegetable industry joined, the tomato industry, and a couple of other vegetable industries. So this is an example. So what did we achieve through this post-harvest innovation so far? The first one was solving practical problems that the farmers identified in partnership with the researchers. So you don't put a research proposal that did not arise based on your discussion with that particular farmer or industry. They define the problem, and your job as a researcher or innovator is to apply your knowledge and maybe develop new knowledge to solve that problem. And there was a timeline. Every year there was a review, every 6 months there was a review. And this was really practical in terms of how it was funded. The second part that was important was the issue of capacity building. Our students got involved in solving real farmers' problems. In fact, in one case, I had a pomegranate dealer in the UK send a senior executive to come and see me in South Africa, have a meeting in the afternoon, and catch an evening flight to go back to the UK. Why would they do that if they were not making money? So this is the kind of agribusiness we're talking about. And the work that we did, that we were able to now partner with those guys, is based on this type of PPP, this private partnership between the government and the private sector. So those are simple examples of actually what we have done in the lab. So the research we do, we make sure that the students publish their papers and our colleagues can go and read them. They're available online. We follow the normal scientific rigor so that we can be peer reviewed, but we still deliver solutions to the agribusiness people. I give you one example. Some varieties of pomegranate were brought into South Africa. The trees were getting mature, but the farmers did not even know when to assess that the crop was ready to harvest so that they can make the journey to Europe and be in good condition. This took a PhD student 3 years. And if you see the summary of the result that the farmers got, you would think that it was not worth it, but it was worth it. 1 page summary out of 13 papers published, telling them the color, the size, the sugar level, the acidity that was required, not only to extend the storage life, but to maintain the flavor. These are the kind of ways that knowledge and science can drive the private sector, but through partnership between the government and the research institution. So maybe I should just leave those as a practical example. On the issue of scientific evidence regarding the myth about particular agricultural commodities here, we have not done any work, and this is part of our plan for next year. This is also an area that is very, very virgin, so to say. And this is where institutions like University of Nairobi and us and others can partner to begin to ask. I give you one example. When I was a little kid, each time we got malaria, or my mom thought that malaria was coming, she would go and harvest these leaves, different ones, some roots, borrow some from our neighbors, and boil them for minutes and hours in a big pot, and then cover our head with a big blanket so that we inhale the smoke. And as far as I was concerned, we were getting healed from malaria. Now, this was now being practiced. I practiced it during this COVID while I'm in lockdown in Nigeria. We're doing it. but there is no scientific evidence to understand the, the phenolics, the flavors, the smoke, and the all those effects. So you've actually raised an important point, which I think is where the role of universities and research institutions lie. We should be pushing the boundaries of knowledge, asking this type of questions, and then look for partnership on how we can uncover the answers.
Thanks, Professor Opara, for that. I think we should stop ignoring our own concoctions and see how we can put them in proper science, because there's a lot happening in Africa at the moment with the COVID, and we've gone full swing. These are discussions. And colleagues, I think those of you in food science, don't ignore this line of thinking of what is happening. See what is Oxford University. If you go to international TVs, CNN, Fox, announcing that they have found that taking honey can lower flu and coughs. How many times have we always taken honey when we are not feeling well before the sore throat is lodged? Now it's being reported in Cambridge or Oxford as a breakthrough in new knowledge. To us, it's not new knowledge, so I always make a joke about it. It's high on it's always in the TV currently, especially because of this COVID challenge. So they are selling big honey in UK, something we have been doing here all the time. So Dr. Abong, you are somewhere, start getting down to business and listen to what the principal is saying. Now, let's take this to the policy level and get some questions to Dr. Ozo. I saw some. Can you start on the chat? There is one, and Joshua Owade has posted one there. Please read it as we take one more, and then we start closing. Anybody with a policy question directed? I had seen quite a number.
Can I give it a go?
Oh, yes, Mr. Owino. I think some people are not able to unmute their mics. I see their hands, but they are not able. I don't know if you're on your side. You can.
I got a question on policy.
Yes, that is
Peter.
Owade, yes. Joshua, yes.
That is Peter. So
continue.
Continue, Peter.
So in Africa, we speak about youth unemployment, and we got several young people graduating from universities with a lot of energy and ideas. What is the universities or the government doing to get these unemployed youth to embrace agribusiness and give them support so that they can create their own jobs through agribusiness? Thanks very much.
I will not answer that, but I did post something for you to read on the chat. Whoever is supposed to answer, they'll respond. Can we get another one? Can I read the one for...
Brother Mongombe?
Yes, please.
The question for Nicholas is a question of a segmented policy framework in the food sector or the agricultural sector. How do we achieve a coordinated and efficient policy framework? Yes, Nicholas?
Okay, thank you very much for that question. The issue of coordination has remained the highest challenge for Kenya specifically. Last year, I conducted the policy and institutional landscape of the agricultural sector, a deep dive in Kenya. And one of the greatest or highest challenge we had or that came up from all the sectors, all the stakeholders, was the issue of lack of coordination from the central government down to the devolved county governments where the extension is domiciled. So it is something that has been flagged, and we believe that the new agricultural policy that is being crafted for Kenya is going to take a very big blow on that challenge by government did their best by devolving extension, and that is good one. And then we all know that in 2012, we also have a national agri sector extension policy. So the country has an extension policy which should even enable the county governments to run very well in terms of implementing the agricultural policies at the county level. But then the challenge remains in coordination, in the allocation of resources to the counties to be able to implement some of the programs, in partnerships with international organizations. Sometimes the World Bank, the African Development Bank, uh, don't have direct funding formula with the counties. They have with the national government or central government. And when this money is given, uh, before it gets to the counties, it can really develop legs and so on and so forth. So we have not seen appropriate coordination. That one is clear for Kenya. But I am optimistic that the new policy is going to, has addressed this, because a problem identified is a problem solved. That coordination in terms of policy will help the central government to know what their roles and responsibilities should be. Will help the devolved county government to know their responsibilities as well as implement it as the case may be. But unless it is implemented and this policy is implemented, it will be very hard to have a good coordination. I also see a question about youth engagement in agriculture, and this is very clear and good. Is a nice question because this starts from the curriculum in the universities. How have we made the curriculum very effective and targeting practical courses, targeting vocational training, targeting entrepreneurship, so that as the youth are in the university, they not only will learn the theory or theories, but will also learn the practical realities on how they can translate what they have learned into practice. And that is the only way we can get self-sufficiency. That's the only way entrepreneurship can drive innovation and drive even research and development. But if our curriculum is not gotten right, and this is also a policy issue, because policy is what drive the curriculum change or modification, then once we get it right at that level, I am very optimistic and sure that the youth will have a place to be empowered to engage in agriculture. Luckily, ICT has made life very easy. And the youth can latch into the provisions of ICT and get attracted into agriculture. Last time I was in the UK, in somewhere in Scotland, and a farmer I was having a meeting with a large-scale farmer, and we were all in a meeting room, but then he was already watching his farm, how the plowing is going on, how the milking of the cow is going on, just at the comfort of his desk and on his computer. So we really need to digitize, and that is, the PS has also mentioned it. This is the only thing that can attract the youth in agriculture, apart from giving also incentives and loan schemes that will enable them access capital to even run with their innovative ideas as they are graduating from the universities. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ozo. Professor Nderito, you have a question. Was that targeting Dr. Ozo?
Yeah, no, sorry. It was targeting the PS.
Okay,
sorry.
the PS has left, as I've said, those issues concerning the ministry. Let's consolidate them and pass them to the to the dean and see how that communication can continue. I think I'd like now to move to ask Dr. Okafor any questions coming from the audience. 2 questions targeting Dr. Okafor, please, so that we move towards winding down. Professor, did you see any specific
I haven't seen any.
Yes.
But as we wait for anybody to come up, maybe Professor Gabriel, he can mention something more about fortification. Fortification of food is very critical in dealing with pandemics like this. But most of our crops are not fortified. What is the challenge?
Yes, I think before Prof steps in, this is an issue even here you take up with the ministry. I did, in my remarks, I did poke holes at the Agenda 4 component on food security, where we have strong emphasis on carbohydrate-based crops, and nothing is said by the mother ministry, agriculture, on that. And then the nutrition policies are with the Ministry of Health, who are not the producers of food. So we need to see a link, because as we talk here, colleagues, I am an agriculture person, and I agree with you 100% with what we are saying. But when we go and deal with the most basic farmer we encounter in the field, when you go outside there, I can tell you some of the stories here will change on how to target those people down at the very grassroots level. They have no access to a computer. We tried to do a workshop last week where we're bringing on farmers from the field to participate with us on a webinar. And we had to become selective to look for farmers who have a cheap smartphone and can hook in, leaving out the majority of the players down there. So we are really dealing with issues in Africa. Now I'm talking as an agriculture person who goes to the field to see exactly what is happening at that baseline. So as we talk of fortification, I always say, like the policy we have in Kenya here, it works very well for us who are town dwellers. But does the poorest of the poor down there, can they access that fortified food? What is the route? Yet we have the land where we can grow the right crop and get the right food on the table. Dean, continue. So
yes,
Professor Okafor, respond to the food fortification. But I've given you the scenario in Kenya, and I've also had the opportunity to travel long distance in Nigeria, where I met people telling me, Ma, your son is greeting you. So answer those. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dean, and moderator. Yes, food fortification is the way to go for this type of pandemic. The challenges, as you asked, Dean, first is having the fortificant. Okay, if you get it from a good source, that would be nice. But oftentimes, if it's adulterated, or sometimes it has expired and they rebagged it, so it becomes a challenge. But if it's well sourced, it will not make the food too expensive from what we have in Nigeria. There is practically no difference between fortified flour and non-fortified with vitamin A. And that, but when it comes to fortification of sugar with vitamin A, there are challenges, technical challenges. Until you get the right equipment, then you will not be able to do that. But companies that are indulging in something are big companies, and they will not be allowed to sell without our regulatory agency ensuring that the fortification was accurately done, at least the minimal level. They must demonstrate that they have fortified the flour oil with that required fortificant and to a particular level. And that's what NAFDAC, our regulatory agency, goes for. It conducts tests to be able to verify that those things are there before they are given the permit to market the product. So if you don't get the, well, it depends on the national need, okay? So I gave you an example about people, okay, another one is iodization of salt. In Nigeria, we have attained 100% iodization of salt by World Health, and that helped to reduce incidence of goiter related challenges. So it's left for you, your country, to identify a particular health condition and then identify the minerals that will take care of it. Now, there are also, to the one that the commoners will afford, biofortification is also there in vogue, where other beans is biofortified with certain essential minerals, okay? So in that case, when they are eating the beans, they have the mineral in abundance in that cowpea. They have biofortified cowpea, biofortified maize, even potato. So it's even cassava. So it's also I think it's also in Kenya. All those biofortified materials.
Thank you, Professor. There is a question by Professor Karanja. Professor Karanja, you had your hand up. Can you please speak? Your hand is raised. Can you unmute? Professor Karanja. I don't know how the unmuting is proving difficult.
Yeah,
yes.
I have.
Okay, kindly speak.
The question is to Gabriel, and in his talk, most of the issues that he addressed on food safety and hygiene were more towards processing. But when you think about the African consumer, close to 80% will go to open air markets, or we produce it in the farms. Very few homes go for processed foods. And the major concern, particularly at this time, is the way the status of our wet markets or open air markets. And I think this question has even been raised in the Western world where we know how their supermarkets look like. It has been a major concern. Could you please, Professor, comment on this issue with respect to the status of our African wet markets, and that majority of us, including even us in urban areas, that is where we go to get our.
Thank you,
Yes,
Professor.
well, yes, okay.
Yeah, go on, Prof. Go
on. Yes, you're right. We are worried about our markets, you know, and they need to upgrade it and install efficient food storage systems for the perishables. Okay, it's part of it. Well, it behoves on the government to work to upgrade whatever that could be upgraded. If you look at the vegetable market, the abattoir, some of them are nasty. So, and anything could spread there, any disease that that could survive in those food materials could easily be spread via those food chains. But our saving grace is that COVID, where the World Health is telling us that it's not spread through food. Packaging, yes, it may through packaging, but you have to adopt measures to make sure that you decontaminate surfaces when you are not sure. Because the major problem is the viability of the COVID virus when it was infected and the time you have purchased it. So we may never know. So that's why I take precaution. But in all, well, will I say, sense of modesty, let's just put it that way, the government and the local council, government councils, and in my country, they have a food inspectorate division under each local government. And they go to the market to make sure that at least some level of hygiene and safety is assured. Whether they do it very well is another discussion. But the government should empower those whose work or duty it is to teach our local farmers and women, those that go to the market, teach them basic hygiene. In my country too, we have what they call, under my professional body, we have what they call that food advocacy campaign. So they go to markets and then identify those food items that may easily help to spread disease, especially the ready-to-eat ones. If they're not well covered or protected or handled, they normally advise them on the best way to do it. So a training program should be organized to make sure that markets are what they are supposed to functioning the way they ought to and minimize spread of diseases. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Okafor. And thank you, colleagues. I know we have many questions we could ask. Some are on the chat, especially the one coming through. Dr. Ozo, I think you could handle, because there has been a lot of, we are seeing a lot of adverts on ground calls at this time. And yet when it comes after those research calls are approved, again, money is moving very slowly, leave alone the other part. And some of the questions again coming through is, how are you going to implement these same agriculture projects in the midst of COVID? So we are getting very torn in between what is happening. So, but I think I would say I want to thank everybody for what they have done. But like also from what Professor Okafor has said, I think all these are upon our own governments, whether you are having the national or the local government, to start implementing some of these issues we are discussing, like our food markets. If you go to Rwanda, they have become very organized in terms of their food markets. But then many times we are saying Rwanda, the population is small and that's why they are able to do. But my issue, which I say, let's start somewhere from small, and maybe those can become learning sites for other areas within the country, so we can improve our food markets in there, because efforts are being made, but then compliance is the issue. If I give food market I saw in Abuja, I was very impressed, but how long will it last? Will our usual issue, if I put my things ahead of your kiosk, I should be seen first before. Those type of tendencies. So I think let's continue talking, giving people the knowledge, and start ensuring compliance. But I think we are tackling a very important topic. We could have gone on, and I want to thank everybody who has really participated here. And I would like to return this to the Dean to call upon the person a colleague will be giving vote of thanks. But I want to thank you all for your contribution, your participation, and above all, Dean, if you didn't realize, you invited our brothers from Nigeria to talk to us. Colleagues, if you didn't know, these are 3 brothers from Nigeria talking to us from different parts of Africa. We thank you so much. Next time we shall revenge the same way. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Mwangombe. Thank you, our moderator. Thank you, our guests. Thanks, our VC. Let me make a small request. Please, all of you, our presenters, Nicholas, Opara, and Gabriel, send us your presentation, please, to the Dean's office so that we can be able to circulate among our students and the colleagues who will be able to internalize the issues. Those were wonderful presentations. And thank you for honoring the faculty, the college, and the university. Let me welcome Professor David Mungai to give us a vote of thanks. Professor Mungai.
Thank you very much, Professor Nyangito, for giving me this opportunity to give a vote of thanks. And before I do so, I want to say 1 or 2 things. Number 1, the topic, as was already has been mentioned by several speakers, is current, it's topical, and it is very well framed. The presentations that we had today are very high quality and were all relevant to the theme. Many good questions and answers were given. The attendance was quite good. At the highest, I think it was 96. And looking at the chart, not only were there questions, but also quite a good number of compliments to the faculty, to the college, and indeed to the university. And for this excellent outcome this afternoon, I'd like to go right away to giving the vote of thanks, beginning with our Vice Chancellor for his time and for his remarks and launching the webinar for the Faculty of Agriculture. We thank him for his inspiring leadership. He made very good comments to the college for the work that has been going on and is going on with respect to training and generation of technologies that are quite useful to our farmers, in the country. So we thank the Vice Chancellor very much for that. Now, the main speaker, Professor Linus Opara, you gave us an excellent presentation on the impacts of COVID-19 and the effects of the virus, the disease, on food and nutrition security. And you ended up by talking about the prospects for, the improvement of agricultural productivity. You gave very good ideas to us, and you even indicated or made a suggestion on what contributions the University of Nairobi can make during and after the COVID-19. The Principal Secretary, State Department for Crop Development and Agricultural Research, we are very grateful. He gave us the policy direction that the ministry is taking. It is quite clear the ministry is on top of the issues regarding food security and food and nutrition security. So we thank the Principal Secretary very much. Now, from there, I would like to thank the Principal of the College of Agriculture and Veterinary Sciences, Professor Nyikal, for her leadership and for her encouragement. Actually, this webinar series are taking place through her guidance, and we all appreciate the support that all of us in the faculties and departments are receiving from her. Now, Professor Gabriel Okafor, we thank you very much for your detailed presentation on issues of food losses, food hygiene, and a number of other issues that you raised in your presentation. We thank you very much for that and for your time to join us. To Dr. Nicholas Ozor, thank you very much, particularly for your contributions to the policy angle to food and nutrition security. Those were very good, the 5 points which you raised at the end of your presentation. We really appreciate that. Next, I would like to thank our moderator, Professor Agnes Mangombe. You have done it extremely well, and you have also made your contribution as an agricultural scientist. We really appreciate that. So thank you very much, Professor Mangombe. The Dean of the Faculty of Agriculture, we thank you for the thinking that went into selecting the topic and even framing it, and making sure that the faculty has done its contribution, not only to the celebrations of the University of Nairobi at 50, but also to the faculty and to the college as well. I would like to thank the Dean of the Faculty of Veterinary Medicine, Professor Ndicho Mainge, for the support in what the college is doing in launching the webinar series in the college. I think the next webinar will be from the Faculty of Veterinary Medicine. So we do appreciate your support. Next, I would like to thank all the chairmen and chair ladies of departments in CABS, College of Agriculture and Veterinary Sciences. You've been very active in all the activities around the celebrations of University of Nairobi at 50, and also your contributions to this particular webinar that we have today. As I said, the attendance was quite good. At one time, I think it was 96, and the participation was also quite strong, both through voice and through the chats. And people were participating from different corners of the country, and I would like to imagine also from other parts outside the country. I would like to thank you very much on behalf of the Faculty of Agriculture and the college for finding time to participate actively in this webinar. Finally, I would like to thank the webinar organizing committee in the Faculty of Agriculture, which was chaired by Dr. Oscar Koech. I believe I've covered the principal areas of vote of thanks. I hope I've not forgotten anybody. If I have, it's not intentional, my apologies. So I'd like to take back now the chair to either the Dean or Professor Mangombe. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Mungai. I think, as already been indicated, we just have to clap to ourselves. And Dean, you can dismiss us with your blessings. Thank you so much. I think we just have to clap for ourselves.
Thank you so much. A clap for all of you. Thank you so much. And may God's blessings be upon yourselves and your families. And we look forward to greater interactions and collaboration into the future. Thank you and nice evening.
Thank you. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Mhm.